Good morning and welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Vicki Green. All right, I'll give you a clue about our topic today, so hang in there with me. There's a lot of quote-unquote buzz flying around this property, way up at 1,000 feet, lots of bright lights in its future, community partnerships, $100 million in federal and state money has been spent on this Worcester area fixture. No matter where you're listening from, can you get it? Well, we'll always end on a high note. It's no pie-in-the-sky facility. All right, enough with the puns. We're here talking about a very serious subject and one we need to keep talking about. And that baffles me because we're talking about Worcester Regional Airport. My guest today is Andy Davis, director of the airport. Thank you for being here, Andy.
Good morning, Vicki. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And you and I were here, 8 months ago or so. So this is exciting because we get to revisit this. And also, to me, why we have to revisit it. Because I think more people need to know about this. And we have listeners from all over the state, southern New Hampshire, northern Rhode Island, northern Connecticut, and particularly if you live within 45 minutes. We've talked about this before. You have the decision, especially if you live like in the Metro West, 495, 128 corridor, do you want to fly out of Logan or should you fly out of Worcester? And people never used to think of Worcester, but now it's more and more people are thinking about it. In the fall, we were talking about JetBlue was expanding their flights. They have 2 straight flights, right?
2 direct to Fort Lauderdale and Orlando.
And I know plenty of people love it, with their kids especially, because Worcester Airport is much quieter, right?
Exactly.
How much does it cost to park a day?
$7 a day, and we'll give you the 7th day free, $42 a week.
So $42 a week when Boston's parking for one day is like $25, isn't it, for one day?
Probably the hourly rate at Boston.
Or hourly.
And actually, the parking is the least expensive in all regional airports around the area. You can get lower fares or comparable fares, but you would have to take a bus or a shuttle from the outlying remote parking. Our parking lots are directly across the street from the terminal and right next to the terminal. 300 feet is walking distance. At that rate, you can't beat.
And so many families are flying to Orlando and Fort Lauderdale. And, everybody I've talked about that's taken a flight from Worcester is thrilled. And they love it. They're almost afraid to get too much press about the airport because they like the fact that it's quiet. But we talked in the fall about JetBlue, which has the 2 flights. They also fly now out of a hub of theirs at Kennedy, which is in New York City.
Right. That started back in May.
Which opens a lot of doors.
It does. They have over 200 flights a day out of JFK alone, not to mention their interline and their interline passengers. So you really have connections throughout the world, not just their domestic system.
And I know a lot of people, including people that work at this station, that fly to JetBlue through Kennedy, through JFK, to get to their destination, whether it be the Bahamas, wherever it is. You also announced that American was adding 2 flights to their hub in Philadelphia. And the big news is that Delta was starting in Detroit. Well, guess it's starting very soon.
Just over a month from now. August 2nd is the first departure to Detroit.
Now tell people, they're thinking, why would I want to fly through Detroit? Explain why Delta's doing that.
Well, Detroit's going through a regrowth also. They fell on hard times back during the crunch with the automotive industry, but it's still home to dozens of Fortune 50 companies. So it has a vibrant business market. But in addition to that, that's a very popular hub for flying beyond Detroit to the Midwest, to Canada, Mexico, even flights to Asia go out of Detroit. And on a comparative basis, you can also fly out of Chicago's O'Hare. But Chicago, much like Boston, is a very congested airport.
Compared to Detroit.
Detroit has very convenient connections, and it's very easy to go through Detroit. So if you're making a connection somewhere, if you have to fly somewhere by having to make a connection, it's an ideal route between Worcester and Detroit and beyond.
Okay. So there are a few things that have changed since the fall. Massport, which also owns Logan, Hanscom Airfield, they own cargo ship ports. They own Worcester Regional Airport. They bought it in 2010, right, which is when you came on board. But you have been working with American for
26 years before that.
Wow. And you told me, from customer service all the way up to now you're president of an airport. Well, that says a lot. So Worcester, they've spent about $100 million in upgrades, which we talked about when you were here, because they had just finished the $32 million CAT system,
Right.
Which people used to complain about Worcester that were afraid to fly out of there because of the weather, and it didn't have instrument reading, planes,
Right.
so it would get canceled all the time. How are things going now, and what are the passenger numbers like now?
Things are going fantastic. Last year, at the end of 2017, we handled approximately 119,000 passengers. We ended a year.
Okay.
We ended 2018 with 145,000 passengers, which was a 30% increase, and that was due to the addition, the 2 months of American Airlines flying and not quite a full year of the JFK service. This year, we're expected to board over 200,000 passengers. That's due to the full year impact of both American and JFK on JetBlue and the addition of Delta starting in August.
So we've heard in the news, and it's been widely reported, that American has decided to drop their second flight due to low passenger numbers. Is that something? I'd imagine that happens at airports all the time.
Well, it's a combination. It's low passengers. There are two things that airlines measure: the yield, which the amount of money they get for each ticket, and the load factor, the percent of customers on board the airplane. When American Airlines announced their intentions to fly out of Worcester, they're really only committed to one flight a day. We were very pleased that they added a second flight. But based on the first 6 months of analysis and looking at the loads and the other factor where they have a demand and a need for aircraft on other routes that are much more higher yielding, they make the decision, just as every other airline does, on reassigning flights in different markets. But they have fully committed to Worcester with that one flight a day, and it's up to us to ensure that we fill that airplane and get them more interested in not only putting larger airplanes in, but more frequency.
Right. We're going to talk about the chicken and the egg factor there, because I didn't think about that before our last show, and it's something that's been on my mind. Now, Massport board chair, who was with us last time, happens to be Worcester County Sheriff Lou Evangelitis. He's been quoted as saying that the goal is to double the number of flights at the airport to 400,000. You currently have about.
We'll end up with about 200,000 at the end of this year.
So 400,000 flights annually within the next 5 years. How are you planning to do that?
Well, we're actively recruiting and pursuing not the existing airlines to increase their service with more frequency and hopefully larger airplanes. But we're going out and meeting with a number of airlines, upstart airlines, existing airlines. We have a route development director that has just come back from a couple of conferences who has met with interest airlines that are now asking for more information about Worcester, because quite honestly, they are seeing that 3 airlines are now flying out of the airport, where 6 years ago we didn't have a single airline. They see and they hear in the news of just how popular and growing Worcester as a whole is. There's something going on in Worcester. So with the airport keeping in step with that is going to require more increased demand at the airport. So we have interest with additional airlines coming here. And what we're focusing on are not just the legacy carriers like American and Delta that fly hub and spoke to make connections, but niche airlines that can fly more point to point, because the most popular flights right out of Worcester right now are the Florida markets with
I got to admit,
JetBlue.
That makes perfect sense.
Right.
And also, the interesting thing was, I had Stephanie Ramey from Discover Central Mass here, and we were talking after the show about, I was trying to get to Florida, but the west coast of Florida, but I wanted a straight flight, so I really want to fly out of Worcester. I live in just east of Worcester, towards that area that you really want to capture. So I was comparing prices, but also including with that the hassle of driving into Logan or busing into Logan or taking a limo or whatever it is, or parking, versus I can take an Uber up to Worcester Airport and much faster, or pay $7 a day to park. I don't have to worry about these long security lines that you hear about at Logan. The thing is that it was very hard for me to find a connection for where I was trying to go, without a long wait. So, yeah, things aren't ideal. If you're able to do that, that's one thing. So the prices were pretty comparable, but because of all the ease of use of the airport, I really wanted to fly out of Worcester. So Stephanie said to me, you know what I did? I had my 3 little kids in tow, And we flew straight to Fort Lauderdale from JetBlue on Worcester. And then we rented a car and drove west. I mean, because you can get to like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you're in Fort Myers. I mean, so if I wanted to do that, I could. So I'm really trying to find every way. But people do like the straight flights. You're right. We need more straight flights.
Yep.
But the only way we're going to do that is to make sure the current ones are full. But I know that the airport's been doing a lot. It's always been a big part of the community, obviously, with this economic impact. And you talk about, Worcester becoming a city. I can't tell you how many shows I've done, no matter what the topic is, if it's arts and culture, whether it's medical research, whether it's economic growth. We're now in the Wall Street Journal. We're in New York Times. What was the headline? Something about the new head, they hired a new dean who was in here for the Becker Graduate School of Professional Studies. And one of the reasons she was interested, her sister, she knew about the job. She's from Pennsylvania, never been to Worcester. Her sister sends her an article, one of those articles in the national press. It says, it's not Hoboken, it's not wherever, Orange, it's wherever it is, Orange County, it's Worcester is the hot city. And yes, the Red Sox definitely coming here has helped that. We've had the restaurant renaissance, I believe, as a Worcesterite for many years. We've had that for a long time. But if getting the Red Sox means we're going to get more attention, which is what sounds like your route development person is seeing, the Worcester Renaissance is going to help everybody.
Right. I actually accompanied the route development director with one of the meetings with one of the airlines, and it was an easy sell for me. The route director talked about the aspects of the routes and the markets and what flights to fly, what destinations to go to. But I sat there, and my time was to talk about Worcester. And it was an easy sell when I told them we're the second largest city in New England. Our population is growing faster than any other New England city. Just in the last 18 months, the city opened up 60 restaurants. We just
is that
opened
what it is?
60,
60
yeah,
in how
60
long?
in the last 18 months.
Oh, I never added it up.
The city just added 2 hotels. They're adding 2 more hotels within the next 18 months when the Worcester Red Sox start cranking up with their development.
Yeah.
That's a $100 million development that the Red Sox is involved in. So,
Well, it's going to end up being more if you count what's going to go around.
Oh, exactly. And then the 13 colleges and universities in the area. We have 36,000 students in the city, and I kind of left that group speechless. They were pleasantly surprised of what's going on in Worcester. So the city is making it easier and easier for me to sell the airport.
Yeah, and it's always been a great city, and I always maintain that. But we're not even talking about people that just live in Worcester. We're talking about people. I grew up in Metro West, and we went east for everything.
Right.
We didn't even think about Worcester. Maybe back then it was the Centrum, not the DCU Center for a concert. But we always flew. My family always flew out of Boston because Worcester at the time didn't really have any major airlines. And I just think that if you live between 495 and 128, and you have to make that decision, you can choose T.F. Green in Providence, you can choose Bradley if you wanted to, but T.F. Green, Manchester's a great example, or Logan, or Worcester. So when you look at it across the board, ease of use, yes, is T.F. Green what a lot of people tell me they like to fly out of Providence because it's easier than Boston. Well, let's get even easier than Providence, which is Worcester. So I know that Delta had an event with the airport earlier this month, which I read about, which was fantastic. Lieutenant Governor was there. You honored 13 area school valedictorians with round-trip domestic airfare tickets out of Worcester via Delta with a big ceremony. These were accomplished kids, and they were from a variety of communities, not just Worcester.
Yeah, it was a great event. We held it right in the terminal at the airport, and even though the lieutenant governor and the congressman weren't able to attend, they provided great videos. So we had.
Oh, she was on video. I thought
that's
she was
right.
there for
Yes,
that. Okay.
And it was really amazing to just see the talent that we have in this area. The kids, you think about a valedictorian having a 4.0 GPA to get up on stage and give the speech. Some of the kids had 4.8 GPAs,
Right.
and when I was going through their bios, they're not bookworms. They're active in sports. They're active in band. They volunteer. They're interns with not-for-profit organizations. I mean, they really go out, and we were proud that we could partner with Delta Airlines to recognize them because they deserved it.
I mean, a ticket? Hello.
Sure.
You're talking a $400 value or more.
Pretty much, yeah.
So per student. So you've been a community player. And here's something that I didn't realize when we met last time, and I think the data is fairly new between October and now when you were here. The airport's always been the player, but data from the Mass Department of Transportation, people know it as MassDOT, did an economic impact study in 2014 and recently, 2019. They found that the Worcester Regional Airport contributed, this is in the 2019 number, almost $100 million to the regional economy, not just Worcester, the regional economy in 2019. And in 2014, it was about $46 million. So you have doubled your economic impact. Now, when you say economic impact, explain what you mean. It's not just people getting on the plane.
Right. It's not just money we're collecting for passengers and parking and whatnot. It's these people that are coming in, mostly destination, people coming into Worcester with their wallets. They're spending money at restaurants. They're spending money at hotels.
So for conferences, business meetings,
yep,
visiting
they're
colleges.
renting cars. They're filling those cars with gas. And in addition to that, the more and more employees we have at the airport, they are now getting paychecks. So their paychecks are going into the economy also. You know, in that study that we did in 2014, it generated both direct and indirect jobs at the airport. These are people that work at the airport and people that work at the Dunkin' Donuts down at the bottom in Tatnick that they had to hire because of the
Square, right?
Right. There were 358 jobs created because the airport's here. And the latest report showed that we estimate 587 jobs. That's a 64% increase. Not only would that number increase, but the payroll increased from almost $15 million to almost $30 million. So that's $30 million of payroll money that is being spent in the area.
Yeah, and that's just amazing. And that's in and of itself. And then, you know, like I said, Dr. Charles Steinberg was here talking about when you have teams coming in now. Right? They often fly for baseball. So they can be easily using the airport.
Exactly.
Because you also have a charter section, right? A charter plane company that houses planes, and then you have some cargo planes that come in there that employ people.
Exactly.
Right.
Ross Retrix is the fixed-based operator. They also have a fleet of charter jets that we never see them in Worcester because they're always flying. We see them come in and pick up customers or drop off customers.
That's high-end.
But that's not just Retrix. These are other companies, the Signatures, the NetJets and whatnot, that are able to use.
NetJet?
That's a charter corporate jet company.
Oh, okay. Like a Fortune 500 company, which we have many here, or a hospital executive, or somebody else might fly. Okay.
So that kind of activity, they would be flying into Hanscom or Beverly or Boston if we didn't have an airport that could handle them.
Right. And I think that's a great point. Now that I'm thinking hospitals, how many conferences do these doctors go to? And I know doctors that use that airport quite often that have to fly.
And the pharmaceutical industry, we always see corporate jets coming in. You know, AbbVie Labs is probably a big client of Worcester Airport and with Retrix.
And they are right next to the main campus of UMass Memorial Hospital. AbbVie, you can see it very clearly near the Beechwood Hotel on Route 9. So if you've ever come to the hospital, you will see AbbVie. And they're headquartered in Chicago, so I know they do a lot of jumping because I used to work with biotechs. But again, our biotech boom in Worcester. Years ago, Kevin O'Sullivan was on the show with me before he retired, who runs the Mass Bio Initiative out of Worcester, and now he's retired. But they started with one building when I used to work with them. Now on Plantation Street and then the Gateway Park that they did with WPI, which you can see from 290, these big office buildings, they're housing the next greatest entrepreneurial company and people that are working hard and going to find a cure, and they have people that want to buy them. So, I mean, you have people coming in and out for that, people coming in and out for college. I don't understand. Do you see a lot of, like, parents coming up? What about kids that go to WPI or Holy Cross from across the country? They're not going to drive.
We do see activity. We can't necessarily identify them, but you know, you think about the activity that draws passengers to fly into Worcester for colleges. It's just not the students on spring break. It's teams that are able to fly in and out. It's recruitment that potential students can come in. Alumni weekends, family weekends. That is what's with the 36,000 students and the 13 colleges. I mean, that is a good crux of opportunity to get more and more passengers to recognize that Worcester is the destination. And, you mentioned in Stephanie Ramey with the DCM, they've really been supporting the airport and saying, hey, Worcester's a destination. Central Massachusetts is a destination, and it's getting easier and easier to get to.
Right. I mean, a lot of what she does is to draw people to the area and let you know about events for fun events, but also to draw conferences here. And what do you need to have people that want to go to a conference that have to fly? You need an airport, and we have it. So in early August, you're having a reception before the launch of Delta's first flight. Been talking about Delta for a long time, and they're going, like we said, through their hub of Detroit. And can you tell me a little bit about that, or is it still in the making? I saw something that might say the mayor of Detroit might actually come out.
Yeah, we're still in the planning stages, but with the first flight leaving at 6 a.m. on August 2nd, we're looking at a reception on August 1st in the afternoon. But
are you going to be on the 6 a.m. flight?
I hope to.
I'll come.
But what we're trying to do is build the relationships between the two cities. We have hopefully the mayor coming in, and maybe Mayor Petty and the mayor of Detroit can come up with some, challenges when the Detroit Lions are playing the Boston Red Sox. Or more importantly, bringing in the Toledo Mud Hens, which is the AAA team for Detroit, to have some competitive opportunities with the soon-to-be Worcester Red Sox. So what we're doing is trying to build those relationships between our two great cities.
Right. So we've talked about the colleges. We've talked about businesses. What we haven't talked about yet is recently, a month or two ago, the airport announced that they were launching this big marketing initiative, about $300,000 spending on all sorts of advertising to get the word out. And it's so frustrating to me because you're here because we need to talk about the airport's economic impact and ease of use. But we were talking about this last fall.
Right.
But it's almost like I said before, the chicken and the egg. Both you and Lou Evangelitis said it in this way, which I never thought about. Okay, well, you want more big airlines in this airport? They're not going to come if we're not filling the current planes that are there. So it's what comes first. You need the people first to be using the current American, Delta, JetBlue more often, and then we're going to get even more. Right? More big-name airlines and more flights. Is that right?
Exactly. And the marketing campaign is to focus on getting the word out. And our primary focus is look at Worcester first. Because all the booking websites, the Orbitz, the Expedias, the Pricelines, people are going to that more and more. There are not many. Exactly. So if you type in ORH first, take a look at the options before you look at the other airports.
And ORH is?
Worcester Regional Airport's three-letter airport code.
You know how every airport has a code? What's Logan's? I forget.
BOS.
Oh, that's right. I mean, I just get the tag on my luggage. I don't even look. But, well, I do look because sometimes, mostly, they don't make sense. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, again, the marketing campaign, and that's why we want to get the word out. So anybody listening, if you have family flying in or they're debating whether they want to take a 6-hour drive or they want to fly from, say, you live in Pennsylvania. You want to fly from Philly to here. American has a flight coming in. You, again, look at not just cost, and ORH, again, is Worcester. You can put in, though, I've done it, you can put in Worcester.
Right. You can spell out Worcester.
Airport in the search, because I was doing that search to figure out, to compare airports to figure out how I could go out of Worcester, because I wanted to make it happen, because it is so much easier to get to. So getting to it, let's talk about that. When you were here last time, we talked a little bit about, in my opinion, what I felt was a lack of signage for people that don't, because I live in this area. I know where the airport is. But if you're just on the highway and you're on the Mass Pike, which people are doing all the time, and taking long drives when they could be flying, have you thought about increasing the signage? Have you done that on some of the highways?
Well, we did a number of years ago, approximately 4 or 5 years ago. We took on a huge initiative. And, when I first got to the airport, I saw various generations of signs. The little Piper Cub with the nose turned left to make you turn left, and then the big jet taking off to make you turn left or right. And they were different style, different generations of signs.
But not a big one saying on the Mass Pike, Worcester Airport exit X.
And those,
now you have that.
They weren't necessarily there either. So what we did was replace the signs and increase the signs. And within an 18-month period, we replaced and added a total of 135 signs throughout the primary routes to get to and from the airport. We increased the size of the signs, and we actually put a few signs in both directions of the Mass Pike to say, best route to Worcester Regional Airport, take exit 10. So if you're coming from Boston, the first primary exit for Worcester is exit 10A. To 146. Well, what does that do? It brings you into the city, and you're exposed to
Right. You want to go out to the Auburn.
You want to go on to the Auburn with exit 10, where there's a lot less congestion, and within 13 minutes, you're pulling up to the front of the curb at Worcester Regional Airport.
Right, which I think is important. So if you do have friends or family, if you have a college student that's got to get out of town to go to college far away, or in town, they're coming in, or you have family members coming in to visit, or when there's a game going, I am advocating, because I've done it. I've flown out of Worcester, and it is so much easier. The cost may be the same, but it is so much easier. And you made a good point to me before the show. Okay, well, you want to spend an hour and a half, flying and doing whatever it is to drive into Logan, or an hour in traffic, or an hour and a half if there's a problem with the tunnel. You could spend that time flying out of Worcester, and maybe it's a little layover at Kennedy. Would you rather be sitting in a car for an hour and a half, or having a glass of wine in the airport
Stretching
for an
your
hour
legs.
and a half, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, you bring up a very good point from your discussion earlier about going across to the Gulf Coast of Florida. Even if you flew out of Boston, even if you flew on a connecting flight through Kennedy or Philadelphia, or even if you flew out of Worcester, one of those segments, one of those flights is going to have a 90-minute impact on you. 90 minutes to drive into Boston, not quite 90 minutes for a connecting flight. Connecting flights are usually 40, 45 minutes, but a plane has to slow down to land and take off. So, yeah, let's give it a 90 minutes.
You want a little bit of a break so you don't miss it.
Exactly. Or 90 minutes to drive across Florida. So either way, you're going to have a 90-minute impact on your trip to Florida.
Yeah, I'd much rather be driving. If I want to go to Fort Myers, I'd much rather drive from Fort Lauderdale or Orlando across than drive through the tunnel that I've been through many times. Okay, one last question as we wrap up. For trivia's sake, because we were talking about this beforehand. How, and you brought it up, Worcester's letters are ORH. Can you explain how, I never knew how, this is just trivia, but it's interesting to me. How did airports get their, why are we called ORH? Because nobody intuitively would go on a search site or JetBlue's site and look at ORH when they want to go to Worcester.
Right. It's my answer is both fact and theory. The fact is airports that were assigned three-letter codes back in the 1940s were restricted from using W's, N's, and K's. W's and K's were assigned to radio stations, and they were navigation beacons for airplanes. So you didn't want to confuse a radio antenna with an airport. N's were reserved for naval air stations. So as a result, Key West should be K-E-Y. It's now E-Y-W. Norfolk should have been N-O-R.
Virginia.
It's O-R-F. Right.
Well, how did Boston lucked out? BOS?
Boston lucked out. No need for
But where
to
did
drop
the
the B.
O-R, I get that out of Worcester. Where did the H come from?
Well, that's the theory part of my answer. When you couldn't use the first letter because of the confusion between W's and K's and N's, you go to the next three letters. So logically speaking, there was ORC would have been assigned to Worcester. Now, back in the 40s, an airport may have already been assigned ORC, or there was some other reason. So
then you go R-D.
So you go to the fourth letter, which would have been O-R-E, but the fourth letter, in the mind of whoever was assigning the airport codes, probably thought Worcester was spelled Worcester, because it's pronounced that way from so many people.
Everyone does that. So they should go O-R-H?
Yeah. ORH is our three-letter code.
Would we really want O-R-E? Can you do or airport? I don't know.
Well, the easy way is type Worcester into Orbit's Travelocity and whatnot.
Or JetBlue's site directly, or American, or Delta.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about all the reasons why. I hope people understand they have a $32 million new system in there. Well, it's not new now. It's been around for over a year, which means you're open all the time. You can fly in all the time. Bad weather doesn't matter. They can fly in, bigger jets can fly in. That's how we got JetBlue and all of these things. And JetBlue's been very happy from what I've read. So again, you've launched this marketing campaign, and we're here anyway. I had you on almost a year ago to talk about the same subject. So your flight numbers your passenger numbers are going up.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that people listening today will go online if they're planning a trip this summer, or a school trip, or family trip, or college trip. tours this summer. I know plenty of people look at flying out of Worcester. So
And just as importantly, tell your family, friends, business clients, customers, partners that Worcester is also a destination, because that's equally important, because it's easier to fill an airplane when you have arriving passengers to visit. Not only that, they're bringing their wallets too. So economic impact benefits of the airport, bring the customers and the clients here.
And economic impact we obviously includes jobs, and we always need more jobs in this area. So thank you so much for coming in,
It was
Andy
a pleasure.
Davis,
Thank you.
Director of Worcester Regional Airport. We always love to see you. And now you got to fly out of here. All right, enough with the puns. That's Community Conversations. I'm Vicki Green. Have a wonderful day.